Alright, I think we're about ready to start, so thanks everyone for coming for the Advancing Your Kaiju Filmmaking Skills channel. So let's get started. Who am I exactly? My name is Jake D'Annunzio, and on YouTube I run the channel Daikaiju Legends. I've been a Kaiju fan all my life, and I also have a passion for filmmaking. And I've been making fan films related to all sorts of Japanese tokusatsu stuff, Godzilla, Ultraman, a bit of Gamera, really for as long as I can remember, since I was like 5 or 6 years old and mashing Bandai figures together in front of a $20 flip camera. And my YouTube channel is dedicated to Kaiju fan films and fan series. And personally, I think that what a lot of people have going on, making their own fan films and stuff, is really one of the biggest parts of the Kaiju community. And so if you haven't seen what I've made in the past before, oh yes, of course, and this entire panel will also be on YouTube afterward on my channel, so. So those are just some samples of my most recent stuff that I've been putting out, as well as stuff in the future. So what do I personally use? I get a lot of these questions sometimes. The camera that I use, I recently upgraded earlier this year to a Panasonic Lumix G7, which is my first, well, it's not a DSLR camera, it's actually a Micro Four Thirds. But it was a semi-expensive upgrade, and you also have to buy lenses for some of these higher-end cameras. But really, for me personally, I think it's been a worthwhile upgrade. But a lot of times, your camera isn't everything. I mean, obviously, the quality that you're going to get from it is going to make your stuff look a lot more professional. But really, you can make your movies with anything, really, and just do editing and all that sort of stuff to make it look good. Movies are made in the editing room, as they say. But editing software-wise, my main tool is Adobe After Effects Cloud CC, which is the latest version of Adobe After Effects. All these Adobe programs, the CC versions, are now monthly subscription-based, unfortunately, so you can't pay a straight fee and buy them all from the get-go. But if you really have the ability to do so, I highly recommend these programs. After Effects is incredible for creating special effects, and it's what a lot of professionals in Hollywood actually use. Adobe Premiere Pro CC is not so much based around special effects, but rather actually compiling footage together and putting sound effects and music and all that stuff in. So that's what I use after I've rendered all of my special effects shot in After Effects. Photoshop, everyone knows Photoshop basically. I mainly use it just to make cool thumbnails and all that sort of wacky stuff, or cut out vector images if need be. Adobe Audition is something that I've just started to get into, which is a voice recording tool, and it also has a lot of tools in there for modifying voices and stuff. I can't tell you much about that, yes. But what I can tell you about is Audacity, which is a free program that you can use to record audio from your computer or your microphone if you're doing voice acting or any of that. And there's also another tool. Shinji going on next to us. Yeah, Audacity's free, and has all sorts of tools as well for modifying voices and sound effects and stuff. I've used it to make alien voices, or robot voices, or even my voice because it's horribly high-pitched. But all that stuff, so. And also, a question that I get is just general advice and how do you improve. The fact is, you're not going to be a master at any of this stuff overnight. It's going to take practice, and if you have the drive to make kaiju movies and you want to get better, then you're going to get better eventually. And I've spent 5 years plus on my YouTube channel at this point, trying to improve. I still have a lot to learn. And just to show you like how far I've come personally, maybe sort of show you what you can do at some point. Maybe this is my 2014. You'll be seeing very crude stop motion special effects, and all these explosions and stuff like animated GIF images. This is just the same scene remade a year later. I got my hands on some stock effects, and then a year later, I remade that scene again as the final product. But in the past year or so, this is 2016, I've improved, and my most recent work, this year, the stuff that I've been able to create, which is all thanks to really just practice. And I mean, obviously, if you're able to get high quality stock effects like these fire and explosions and stuff, your stuff's going to be better. But it doesn't make it entirely, but will definitely help. So stop motion animation is a bit of a difficult thing for some people, and I myself, as you saw in that very first clip in 2013, that was one of the first times that I tried doing stop motion, and I still have a lot to learn about it. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it can really work very well. So I have a few keys that stop motion and practice, of course. Practice makes perfect, and stop motion requires a lot of it. We just showed I spent 4 years working on stop motion, and I mean I don't use it entirely, because you can also use like puppetry and like hold your little bandai figures in front of the camera and make them walk around and stuff. And yeah, it's really up to you, but stop motion I feel like is sort of the higher level sort of skill to have. Patience is the second key. Stop motion animation takes a lot of time. It can take like 15 minutes just to make like 3 seconds of footage or so. And I've got another video just to show you how long this can sometimes take. So this is a clip of me doing stop motion that's 50 times faster than it normally was. Originally this was 10 minutes of animating. One thing I do want to point out is, well, we'll get to that in a second. This is what but yeah, so you'll see that little claw stand on the left there, and those are Tamashi stage stands, which if you're animating human characters in any capacity, or even monsters sometimes, those can be a huge help because they'll keep the figure standing upright the entire time that you're going, basically. And yeah, this is some of my most recent stop motion all right here. Yeah, that all goes by very slowly animated, but in the end it looks pretty decent. The third piece is pictures, and by that I mean take as many pictures as you can, because when you're editing you can always remove frames of stop motion, but you're not really going to be able to add any in unless you go back and reshoot that entire sequence or whatever. And one of the times that I've had to cut out, a lot of frames is in this video. This is just something of how slow you can really animate something in different speeds. But this is a clip that I animated recently for a short that's premiering here at G-Fest, where Godzilla was, he's clearly talking, as you can see there. This was like 15 minutes of animating. And you can see like how slow his mouth is moving and such. And in the final product, as we'll see in a moment, I actually ended up cutting about 2 or 3 seconds of animation entirely because I needed to match his mouth to the dialogue that I had. But it really saved me a lot of trouble by taking so many frames of animation, because I didn't have to go back and try and remake that entire thing. So other general stop motion tips. If you're animating 2 monsters fighting, they're both stop motion, my tip is you don't have to animate them in a single shot. Because if you're using a green screen or something, obviously you're removing the background, so you can really just put them together in any sort of situation. So my advice is if you're using a green screen and you know like the exact kind of shot that you want, I would animate them individually, because a lot of times if you're animating figures together and trying to get them to move simultaneously and stuff, that can get a little wonky in your brain. So like, oh, was this arm going up or down or something, or what leg was moving on this monster or something? This is all these shots in this video here. Neither of these figures were in the same shot together when being animated. And this one in particular, you can sometimes move figures around with your hand and such in that shot. I have used a mask to remove my hand from moving the monster up and down and smashing into it. The mask is basically in After Effects or other editing software. You take like a pen tool, you sort of draw around an area that you don't want to see. So I was able to move the figure in this shot and make my hand invisible basically. And quite back there, stop motion. So it ended up looking pretty cool, I think. So another question that I get sometimes is special effects, where and how do you get them? So they can be found in all sorts of places really, both ones for free and ones that you have to pay for. My place that I got all of my special effects for quite a while was a place called videocopilot.net, which they had a pretty good range of stock elements and plugins for building After Effects. And some of those include action sequences too. If you've seen a lot of YouTube videos with explosions or all that sort of fire and all sorts of stuff, if you might notice, a lot of them look the exact same, and that's because a lot of people use Action Essentials too, which I don't remember the exact price. I feel like it was $100, I think, when I first bought it. But it includes like fire, explosion, dust, debris, a little bit of water stuff. There's even some textures in there for bullet holes and all sorts of stuff. Shockwave is another one that I use a lot. They have a couple of free shockwave elements on their website, but they have an even bigger package of like 60 shockwaves. And they can really be used up for all sorts of stuff. I use them for when monsters are shooting beams or something, need a little explosion to come out of their mouth or something impacts on the ground. I might use a smoke shockwave to sort of send smoke flying everywhere. It's a really cool set of shockwaves, really. VC Flight Kit is something that I use a little less now, but this is a pack of a couple things actually on Video Copilot. It includes some sound effects for explosions and airplanes and all that kind of stuff. It includes a plugin called Heat Distortion, which is something in After Effects you can just put over a layer of footage or something, and when you're outside on a hot summer day or something, you'll see everything starts to look like blurry and wavy and all that sort of stuff. That you can do that in After Effects for you. You can create artificial heat distortion. And it also includes explosions that are supposed to look like they're in the air, which I use sometimes nowadays, but I've upgraded my stock effects recently, so not so much anymore. Element 3D, I can't talk too much about this because I haven't used it because it's a little bit more on the expensive side, but just for anyone that might want to hear about what this is exactly, it's a plugin for After Effects, and it's essentially a 3D renderer. It essentially transforms After Effects into this entire space where you can bring in 3D models. And Video Copilot has tons of both free and paid for model packs for this plugin. There's, for all of them, there's animated or 3D cityscapes, so there's tons of buildings, there's airplane models, tons of those. I'm trying to remember what else there is, but I don't know that. But if you go on that website, you can check out all the stuff they have, and it's definitely a bit pricier. Optical flares is one of my all-time favorite plugins for After Effects, and I'm going to sound like J.J. Abrams because I love lens flares. And optical flares basically adds lens flares into After Effects, and it's basically a lens flare builder. If you don't know what lens flares are, if you've ever seen any of the new Star Trek movies, or any modern action movies really, you'll see sometimes when light on a lens flares up, so to say, you see these streaks going across the screen, those little optical little circles going across the lens. Those are lens flares, and for the longest time I was using them to create artificial light in the scene. I was adding orange lens flares to explosions and stuff to make them look cool, super cool. but nowadays I use them a lot for just accentuating certain effects. If something's super duper bright, I'll put a lens flare on it and I can really draw your eye to something in the scene if you really want to get that effect. Saber, which is a free plugin from Video Copilot, and it's really one of the best ones that they have, especially if you're making kaiju films, because Saber, it's intended for lightsaber effects primarily, but it also has a lot of cool presets for making like energy beams and stuff. So I've used it to make atomic breath and stuff, and there's something later in this panel I'm going to show you that really showcases what you can do with this free plugin. And this site is also very helpful if you're looking for tutorials. It has over 150 as of about a year ago, 150 I checked recently. But it'll teach you about the basics of After Effects, as well as general stuff for their plugins and stuff. They'll teach you how to use them. And on YouTube too, there's tons of tutorials, and you don't even have to look for like kaiju-related special effects tutorials. You can take what you learn from other tutorials and apply them to your own stuff, which is what I've been doing really. Because on YouTube, there's not too many tutorials about how to create special effects for Godzilla and Kaiju and stuff. Yeah, they're immensely helpful if you need any knowledge on using these plugins or effect packs that they have on their website. So other places that I get special effects. Recently, I switched to actionvfx.com, which is an enormous library, really, of sort of premium quality stock footage in both 2K and 4K resolutions. If you know what 2K and 4K mean, then that's important to you. They have explosions, fire, debris, fog, smoke, embers and sparks. They can be pretty expensive, very expensive in fact. They are a premium line, essentially, of stock effects. And what I've done to sort of get my hands on a lot of them is I've taken advantage of 50% off sales that they have across their entire website. In the past year, they've had them twice. They did one the entire month of May, just recently, and then last year they did one around Black Friday, so that might be a good time to look out for that. They also have a newsletter where they'll send out stuff like, oh hey, we're having a sale soon, so you can prepare your wallets for that if that interests you. And every few months they add even more and more stock effects. I think right now they've said they're working on flamethrowers, water blasts and other water effects, blood blasts and stuff, and atmospheric fog. And most of these effects come with an alpha channel. And if you don't know what an alpha channel is, it's essentially if you put, let's say, an explosion onto your composition in After Effects. If it has an alpha channel, there won't be anything that you need to get rid of in the background. It'll just be, man, the explosion is right there, and you don't have to do anything else to it, really. Things that don't have an alpha channel would be things like you need to key out a green screen or get rid of a black background or something like that. Most of their effects come with stock or alpha channels. Another place that I've begun exploring is redgiant.com, which they're home to not really stock effects so much as they're home to many plugins for After Effects that can really enhance the quality of the work that you're putting out. They have the Traffic Code Suite, which has stuff like Particular, which I started using on a free trial actually. Oh my god, look at that mouse. And Particular has been so helpful to me, and I'll let you guys in on a little secret. The free trial for Particular lasts forever. There's just a giant red X in the middle of the layer if you do it there, but the way I've gotten around that is if you take the layer that you're putting the particles on, you scale it up just so the red X is out of frame. You can basically use that plugin forever. It'll be a little harder on your computer if you do that, but it's a $200 program for free, essentially, if you do that. Form and Mirror, which I had not gotten into recently, because, again, all these plugins do cost quite a bit, and they seem very advanced, but from what I've been able to learn, they're sort of used for creating 3D elements out of still images, in a sense. That's the main reason that One way that I've seen it used is someone's taken a like photo of the galaxy or something, and they use form and mirror to raise the galaxy up so it looks almost 3D in a sense. I've also seen mirror used for creating the light speed effect in Star Wars, which that looks really cool. They basically made it exactly like in the movie. So other plugins they have noise removal plugins. So if you've ever shot a video and you notice that things look fuzzy, so to say, or you see like colors rapidly changing on a very, very small scale, that's what's called noise. And that often happens when you're shooting in lower light situations or you have the exposure settings on your camera a little wonky. Yeah, they have professional noise removal stuff as well as color correction, which color correction is always useful if you want to make yourself look really professional. And this is one that I think for Kaiju fans that want to make movies is really interesting. It's called Tsunami, and yes, that's how it's spelled. Which is essentially a ocean simulation inside of After Effects. You drop the effect onto a layer, and it creates like a literal ocean. You can mess around with every single aspect of it, like the wave size and speed, water splashes, and all that stuff. I have not used it yet, but I really want to because it seems very useful if you want to create the effect of a monster wading through the water or something. You don't want to use like a stock image of a beach or something. Yeah, again, these can be pretty expensive, but take advantage of things like student discounts, which I've considered. I'm going to university later this fall, and I definitely plan on using those student discounts. They give you sometimes up to a 50% discount off the full program. And even if you're in high school, you can get a student discount from stuff on redgiant.com. Free trials, like I said, or other deals that they may have. I'm not sure if they do stand or not, but just keep a lookout on those websites for all that stuff. Some tips for special effects. So YouTube is home to hundreds and hundreds of tutorials, like I said. You can check them out, learn the basics of stuff, but the main thing really is experimenting in whatever program you're using yourself. And perhaps the hardest part of making any film in general is making the effects look, convincing, so to say. And here's a couple tips on making stuff look pretty decent. Depth is one thing. So you can give your scene and its subjects depth, so to say, by adding artificial blurring to make objects look out of focus in the shot. If you have like this giant monster that's supposed to be the forefront of the shot, and you have this entire city in the background or something, in a real movie you probably wouldn't see that city clear as day. So if you add a blur effect or something to things that are in the background or out of focus, you can do all sorts of cool things to make the shots look just that much more professional. Lighting. You can apply elements like glows and lens flares, like I was saying earlier, to fire and explosions to make them just pop a little more and see so much more lifelike. And also another thing you can do is, well, I'll show this a little bit later with a special demonstration, but something that I'll often do is I'll take the footage layer and duplicate it and sort of color correct it a little bit to make it brighter and draw a mask, like I was saying earlier, around the area of that to sort of add artificial light. And real quick, that's not what I want to go to. Sorry, Dad, your email's on display for everyone to see. Let's see, lighting, here we go. So, as you can see, in all of this, there's glow is applied to all these fire elements and stuff. And on the figures, there's also light effects, like where that fireball hits it right there. You can see the light from that fireball coming on to him. And in this shot, I wanted to make this during a sunset, and I'll pause it there so you can check that out. So once you learn how things just look during certain times of day with different lighting conditions, you can create cool stuff like this where both of the subjects are silhouetted essentially by this sunset right here. And then this shot, where we switch to a different angle, where they wouldn't be completely silhouetted, you can see the well, our right side of Walton there is much darker because he would not be receiving any light from the sun on that side, but on our left side, you can't see the light from the sun as well as a small lens flare there, pushing light onto him, as well as a little shadow on the ground. That might be hard to see, but you can see a little bit. And shadows and all that kind of stuff look really good if you learn how to do that. And again, part of that is just experimenting with everything that you've got. Close out of this stuff. Oh God, I'm sorry, Dad. Impact. So artificial camera shaping can really help, in fact, really seem to impact the world around you. Because as someone that does a lot of, well, they do all of their kaiju stuff on green screens, there's nothing really for them to interact with that sort of makes them seem really there. Obviously, if you're doing stuff on a miniature set or something, you've got stuff actually in the shot, and camera shape will always help you really. So we've got another short video here of impact. And it's sort of subtle some of the times, but if you see here, he crashes into the earth, there's camera shaking, smashes into the ground, camera shakes again. And even stuff like laser beams, the camera shakes a little bit as it's firing. And because you're dealing with giant creatures and you're making kaiju movies, and obviously they're going to leave an impact on basically anything they do. So camera shake really helps to get that sort of feeling that they're actually in this environment that you create. Obviously, people feel like, oh, there's green screen in there, but that allows an over of just help take their mind off that a little bit.
Do you actually shake the camera when you're doing that? Or?
Oh no, this is in After Effects actually. So if you don't know what After Effects is, this might just go one ear and out the other. But there's tons of tutorials on YouTube about camera shaking. It's essentially just you keyframe the position of the entire composition essentially, and like one frame at a time, I essentially just go in, drag the composition around a little bit, and then sort of creates an artificial shape of the camera. So you can use expressions sometimes. For me personally, if it's just an impact, I'll just move it around manually. But if it's an entire shot where the camera's just sort of wiggling around a little bit, there are expressions in After Effects that you can just do that. And expressions, for those of you who don't know, in After Effects, you can essentially type what amount to mathematical equations into your effects, and they'll do stuff without you having to change the main, essentially. You can click one thing, and it'll apply a motion blur effect to it, and so the house will be blurred as it flies across the screen. After Effects always includes stuff for stop motion to help with that too. Something called pixel motion blur, which if you apply that to a stop motion clip, it will add artificial motion blur to stop motion without you having to individually blur out an arm as it's going for a punch or something. And that really helps make stuff look that much better. Obviously, pixel motion blur for stop motion will be perfect, especially if the stop motion is very, very fast and something's like punching and kicking or flying around super, super quick. But it's a good tool to use to sort of help you out with all that stuff. So more tips. The process really for me is I key out backgrounds, build the environment, like the sky and buildings and anything else that I want to do. Add lighting and other atmospheric effects like dust and all that stuff. And then any other effects that I want to or need to add in, like explosions, fires, all that stuff. And so learning what does and doesn't work is a big part of creating interesting, realistic effects. And that all boils down to just experimenting, like I keep saying. If you just try and do the same thing over and over again, you're not going to get anywhere, really. So try different things, look up different tutorials on YouTube. Maybe someone does it, or like, yeah, someone does this explosion a little bit differently than you might or something. And you might learn different methods of doing that, and that'll look really, really good. Try compositing together different effects for different results. A lot of the things that I do when things crash into the ground, there's not like just one little wave of dust that comes out. I often end up compositing like up to 5 or 6 different elements of debris and dust and stuff. So if something falls on the ground, I added a little bit of bigger debris that fly toward the camera, some smaller rocks and particles, dust that goes out to the side, dust that goes straight to the camera, ground cracks that appear on the ground that they've fallen on, and all that stuff. So really, again, it's all about experimentation. After Effects, the program comes with so many built-in features, like all those plugins and stuff that I mentioned earlier. That's really if you just want to take your stuff to the next level after you've learned After Effects. After Effects by itself comes with so many built-in features that can help you make cool effects, like they have lightning creators and basic lens flares that you can make, glow effects like I was saying earlier, and really if you put your mind to it and just play around with the program and experiment, you can come up with a lot of really, really cool stuff still. After Effects also comes in with a built-in particle studio. I was talking about that particular plugin earlier, which creates very, very advanced particle systems. But After Effects comes with its own particle studio. It's a little bit more streamlined, I guess so to say, compared to some of the higher-end plugins. But you can take advantage of that if you don't have stock footage or anything to make artificial fire and beam effects and all that sort of stuff. So now we have a cool demonstration of how I create one of my visual effects shots entirely in Adobe After Effects. So we might be able to turn the lights down real quick if we're able to try that, because otherwise this might be a little bit difficult to see. But yeah, well actually while we do that, I forgot to show you a few clips. So this is a clip of something called, which After Effects has something and this is sort of used for super, super smooth movements. As you can see, these figures, these are vinyl figures, not like figure arts or monster arts or anything. And they're all moving around super fluidly and everything. It takes a little bit of practice to get used to it and how it all works and stuff. But you can create artificial movement from what end up being still images, essentially. You can get smooth movements from tentacles and stuff like that, and have a monster breathe or something. It's really used for all sorts of cool stuff if you're doing Kaiju stuff. And then this one, I just want to tell you, if you're unhappy or even unsure about how a shot turns out, try it again. This is one transformation sequence that I remade about 8 times total. And each time that I did it, I was just a little bit unsatisfied, so to say, with how it turned out. So it goes through many, many changes, and then finally I wound up with this version, which is what I was happy with. And each of these took about a day to totally create from scratch with all these particles and stuff going through. But if you're unsatisfied with what you have at all, I fully encourage you to just try it again. But so for that visual effects demonstration, I'm going to show you, and it's fitting that we have Shinji's panel next door, because I'm going to show you how to make this. So this is a shortened down version of a video that will be on my channel, a full 45-minute tutorial about doing this effect. This is all sped up, so we're going to try and fly through this just a little bit. So as you can see right here, I've got my stop motion footage in After Effects, and I'm taking the key light effects and keying out the background. And as you can see, it looks pretty decent with just using the eye drop tool to pick the background. But if you go to a screen map view, where it shows the alpha channel, you can see that there's parts of the background that were still showing and parts of Godzilla that were gray, which means that they were transparent, essentially. So playing around with the clipping settings, you wind up with something that looks a lot better in the long run. It might not make much of a difference at first, but it'll do better from the start of it. And right here, I'm playing around with the softness of the screen, which is sort of how harsh the effect is between the key background and the monster. And I'm also playing around with the shrink and grow settings of the effect right there, which, as you saw, we were sort of bringing that key effect back a little bit toward Godzilla's mouth. And you might not notice it from a distance, but really it helps you just make the effect that much better. And here, I just grabbed in the background a starry night sky. I just wanted to keep it simple for this demonstration. And I just ended up playing the contrast and brightness that a little bit, because I didn't want the stars to sort of show all the way, basically. So there's a stop motion of Godzilla opening his mouth. And what I wanted to do was add glow effects to Godzilla, as you can see. So Shin Godzilla at nighttime essentially has parts of his body that glow, obviously, like the mouth, the spines, and for the purpose of just this demonstration, I ended up making a little divot around his neck glow a little bit. So here we're taking the pen tool and drawing what's called a mask, like I was saying earlier, around that part of Godzilla's neck. And so what that essentially is a layer that is only that part of Godzilla's neck. And as I was showing there, as Godzilla opens his mouth and moves around a little bit, the mask does not move with it. So you need to go into keyframes sometimes. You can use motion trackers and 3D camera trackers and all that stuff. But for this, just to make sure it was as accurate as possible, I went in and each of those frames, each of those keyframes down there, I was moving the mask around to have it fit to that spot on Godzilla's neck. So once that was finished, that's what the layer looks like by itself. It's just that part of Godzilla's neck masked out. And so basically what we wanted to do for this shot, obviously, is make it glow, like I said. So we're using a free plugin from Video Copilot called Color Vibrance. And we put that on that layer, and as you can see, that adds color to it, basically, essentially. So we changed that color to red and brought up the brightness and gamma settings and all that stuff. And so you can sort of see the beginnings of what we're doing with this effect here. So then I took a fill effect, and that turned the entire mask red. So I brought down the opacity of that effect, which is how transparent the effect is. And then we wound up with something like that, where you can still see Godzilla's skin. And we feathered the mask out, which is how harsh the edges of the mask are. So the glow is sort of dispersing a little bit, and we added a glow effect, which, as the name implies, makes the layer that you apply it to glow. And a lot of this is just playing around, like I said, in the program, because there's a lot of settings that you might not even understand what they mean. I'm still learning what half of the mumbo jumbo with these editing programs mean. And then on the original Godzilla layer, here I was playing around with the curves adjustments for that layer, and which curves is where you can adjust the color channels as well as the brightness and contrast. And then I added a hue and saturation effect, which desaturates Godzilla a little bit, and then we also brought down the brightness straight up just a little bit. Like I said, a lot of it's just playing around. You'll find different effects in this program, and as you learn what they mean and what they can do for you, you'll find out which ones you want to use for certain effects. So what I'm doing here is creating glow for Godzilla's spines, which essentially just involves drawing a shape layer around Godzilla's back and make it red. Well, how's that going to make Godzilla's spines glow a little bit? Well, we add a fast blur effect and turn down the transparency of that layer, and we start to get something that looks like we want. And then we also added a radial blur, which is a blur that sort of pushes the effect outward from the center of it. And so that's sort of just a subtle way of doing the glow for Shin Godzilla at nighttime. And then here, I actually went around and, like I said, I just played around more with the glow effects on the neck layer and such. And so I wound up with something that I liked a lot more, which, if I remember right, I just duplicated the neck glow layer one more time, I think. And one of those layers I got rid of the fill effect and upped the glow a lot. And what that did was sort of, well, not only make the red parts of the neck glow a lot more, but it also allowed, as you can sort of see there, it allowed Godzilla's skin to sort of cover certain parts of that effect. So you sort of get that real, like, veiny, fleshy look still with the glow coming through. And now I'm doing the same thing that I did with the neck for the mouth. I'm drawing a mask around the inside of the mouth, and by using keyframes, which are essentially parts of masks and such that can move it around for you. So I use those to basically move the mask around, so I didn't have to do it every single frame, because that would have been about 30 times. I would have to redraw the entire thing. And then we did the same thing. We added that color vibrance effect once again, made it red, brought up the brightness a little bit, and then we had a brightness and contrast effect to sort of make it a little bit brighter, because unfortunately I didn't have a flashlight or something shining into Godzilla's mouth, so kind of had to bring up the brightness myself in editing. So we wind up with something like that, also by adjusting the opacity so that as Godzilla's mouth opens up, we set the opacity of the mouth to 0 at the very beginning and 100 once his mouth is completely open. So as you can see, that glow sort of fades inward a little bit as Godzilla is opening his mouth up to fire his atomic breath. So next up, what we want to do is essentially change all the red glows to purple as Shin Godzilla is opening his mouth. So what I did is I took all those color vibrance effects and set keyframes for the color itself. And I put the first keyframe before Godzilla opened his mouth, and the last one after he finished opening his mouth. And on that last keyframe, I adjusted the color of all of the fill and vibrance effects to be the same pinkish color a little bit. And the shape layer, we had to add a fill effect and time to color there to go across the entire composition. So at the end there, we wind up with Godzilla opening his mouth and transitioning from red to purple as he opens it up. And you can see what that sort of looks like at this point right there as we scrub through the time. So after that, I felt like I wanted to add even more of a glow to Godzilla's mouth. So I added yet another glow effect and played around with things like the radius of the glow and the threshold. Really, a lot of that was just playing around and seeing what stuck the best. So the glow effect sometimes, what I like to do is add one glow effect that's sort of a tighter glow, so to say. So right in the immediate vicinity of where you're trying to make glow, it'll glow, obviously. And then another glow effect is added that has a much larger radius so that that glow spreads even more across a wider area, which works especially well for nighttime shots like this, where things are glowing all over the place. So this next shot right here is where we wanted Godzilla to start shooting smoke out of his mouth. So the background was keyed out once again, and essentially a trick that I often do when I'm editing many shots that are similar in a row is I'll just copy and paste a lot of the effects from the first composition onto that second one. So I just wound up copying and pasting all those effects into this new composition, which saved many minutes of time, which really just helps all the editing to go that much faster. So then I made a new black solid, which there's nothing on that, but if we add the particle system effect, this is the one that's built inside of After Effects, so it comes completely free with the After Effects program itself. And this is just a system of particles that we're moving around all over the place. And I changed the physics of the particle system to fire and brought down the outward velocity just a little bit. So we wind up with this sort of stream of particles going straight up. We changed those particles to faded spheres instead of lines, and changed the color from birth to death. So when they start coming out of Godzilla's mouth, there'll be a semi-light gray, and then when they end, there'll be an even darker gray. So then we flipped around the camera of the particles a little bit and positioned them as we wanted around Godzilla's mouth so that it would look like he's shooting smoke. And that's essentially what it ended up looking like by itself. With an alpha changing. So that's that motion blur that I was talking about earlier. You click that button and it'll automatically add motion blur to things like particle systems and stuff. Because, like I said, things don't really look crystal clear when they're moving super fast. They're going to look blurred and all that stuff. So this is just more playing around with the settings of the smoke and stuff. We see we're adding just more extra angles to the smoke so that it'll go all over the place. And then I applied a fractal noise effect to that smoke layer, which essentially adds noise onto whatever layer you put it on. So as you can see, it has a sort of smoky effect now. And then I brought down the brightness and contrast effect, and I also typed in an expression there. I typed in time times 500, I think, which essentially means it's going to animate the evolution, so to say, of that smoke and make it actually move around. And then I also animated the turbulence, or offset turbulence effect, which is essentially where the center of the noise is, and I brought that down so it looks like the smoke is coming down. Because the fractal noise effect by itself is just a still effect. It doesn't do anything until you type in expressions and animate it yourself. So then I pre-composed that, which is essentially adding one layer or multiple layers into a separate composition so that you can alter that however you want. So I drew a small mask around Godzilla's mouth with that smoke so that it looked like it was coming straight out of his mouth. And this is more just playing around with the settings. And we wound up with something that looked like that. So I also added a directional blur, which blurred all the smoke going straight down, where you can change the angle however you want. And you end up with that blurred smoke sort of effect. So that's how that looks right now. And then adding in all the glows and stuff, it looks a little weird because, yeah, Godzilla is just sort of blowing smoke and there's no glow going into it. And see, we're running a little short on time, so I'll have to speed through the rest of this, but a lot of this is the same principle. So this is him shooting smoke again. We just added a new particle layer on this one and changed it to a shooting fire layer, basically. And then that saber plugin that I was talking about earlier, that was used to create Shin Godzilla's actual beam effect. So we're playing around with all the distortion elements and stuff with that, and eventually we wound up with what looked like that. And then all the effects at the end that you saw with him destroying the buildings, where sparks were flying everywhere and stuff, that was all action VFX, stock effects that I've been using, which those aren't completely necessary, but they can really help to accentuate that effect. And yeah, sorry I had to cut this demonstration a little bit short, but the entire 45-minute version of me talking over making this effect live while I'm doing it will be on YouTube sometime within the coming week, hopefully. So yeah, maybe we'll bring the lights back up real quick. So we have just a couple more things to get to, which is first getting your work out there. Obviously, YouTube, that's the place to go for everyone. It's by far the easiest place to show everyone your projects and what you've been doing and get feedback. And of course, you're going to get criticism, and a lot of people end up being afraid of criticism. And I mean, I understand why, because a lot of people on YouTube especially can get really nasty with their comments and stuff. Be like, oh, your stuff is awful, and I really didn't like your stuff. But really, if people don't like it at first, maybe reply back and say, what didn't you like? What can I improve upon? If they don't respond, then that just gives you a drive to keep improving. That's how I personally always keep improving. I get comments like, oh, maybe you should change this and this and this with your special effects and stuff. And you know, that always helps because I'm still trying to learn. I'm 18 years old, I'm not doing this professionally yet. The amateur film contest at G-Fest, obviously, this is always really, really good fun. It's hosted every single year and allows all of us, our amateur filmmakers, to show off our creations right here at G-Fest. And that's, yeah, tonight at 9 o'clock. I'm actually showing there. Showing something there tonight, actually, something new. And it's always fun to see what your fellow filmmakers have to show off, really. And you might even learn something from them, really. You can go up and talk to them afterward and be like, oh, how did you do that? Or what did you use to make that effect? And all that stuff. So now we have about 10, 15 minutes maybe, just to do a bit of Q&A about any questions that you might have regarding filmmaking. And then again, thanks to Kodesh, who's going to be our mic guy. I'm not sure if that's on already. There we go.
Anybody have any questions?
Anyone?
I was just curious, like for green screen, what do you find is like the greatest, biggest thing that helps get a good key out?
So easily, having good lighting is the best thing that'll help you there. I have a couple of really cheap studio lights set up on my green screen so that they're shining from both directions right onto the green screen. Because when you're keying out a green screen, you're basically picking out one single color. And if you have like shadows and all that stuff around the green screen, it's not going to come out right. You're going to end up with a lot of noise in the video and a lot of gray things that didn't get keyed out. And another thing actually is if you have figures on the green screen and you're showing like the bottom of like the lower end of their body, where their feet and tail are and stuff, there might be shadows that they're casting onto the ground. What you can do is either get another light and shine it under them somehow, or what I always use are what I call garbage masks, which are masks that you draw around any sort of shadows that you might have in the green screen, so that it'll get rid of them essentially. Yeah, and that'll really help when you add the green screen effect, because will just ignore all of those shadows that you would need to get past otherwise. So.
How long does it usually take you to like do like the whole thing, like stop motion and the effects and everything?
So I would say for a single scene or so, like that Shin Godzilla Atomic Breath scene, all the stop motion and filming was done in roughly half an hour, 45 minutes maybe. There wasn't too much animating to be done there. And then special effects by itself. I cut a lot of it out in the tutorial because it's just me sitting in silence, toying around with effects and stuff. But that'll took me about an hour or two or so. And my longer projects that end up being like 20, 25 minutes, my most recent one ended up taking me 2 or 3 months to make. So if you really want to do it and have the time to put into it, then by all means do that.
Any other questions?
What camera do you shoot?
Sorry, what was that?
What kind of camera do you shoot?
I shoot on a Panasonic Lumix G7, which costs around $600 I want to say on its own, and then obviously it comes with one lens that you can use. I think it's 14 to 42 millimeter, and then you can buy other lenses as you go, obviously. And I just upgraded, like I said earlier, after using my Sony camera for about 5 years or so. So yeah, again, your camera isn't everything, but if you want your stuff to look super professional, it can't help but I think we have time for a couple more questions if anyone's interested.
You mentioned going to college this coming year. Are you doing any of this?
Yes, I'm actually going to college for film and video production, and I might end up focusing on editing and special effects and all that stuff, maybe a bit of directing with that. Because really, I just spent the past nearly 10 years of my life just editing and having fun with all that, and it's really what I've got a passion for, so yeah, that's the plan. So.
Not very competent with computers, but my son is. And we're looking at buying something, Mac or PC, or does it not matter at all?
So at least in recent years, what I've heard is like, oh, Macs are better for video editing. I haven't tried a Mac, so I can't really say. But every time that I use like someone else's MacBook or Mac, I just get a little bit confused because it's an entirely different operating system. So really, I would just stick with whatever operating system you have. But for video editing, what really matters is the power effect here. Because if you're doing super complicated effects with lots of particles and explosions and debris and all that stuff, your computer can go pretty slow at times. My PC that I use now costs about $500 before tax, I think, and I've been using it the past 2.5 years. It works fine, but if you do your research on graphics cards, RAM and processors and all that stuff, you can basically find whatever you're looking for.
What do you use for video storage to store if you made your finished product?
So for storing video, for a while I just keep it on my normal desktop. I always back it up to an external hard drive though. My PC and that external hard drive are about 1 terabyte of storage each. And if you start getting into a lot of stock effects and stuff, that can also take up quite a bit of space in your computer. So If you really are shooting like longer projects and stuff, I would buy an external hard drive to, you know, just have extra storage if need be for whatever you're shooting. And if you're done with the project and you know you won't ever need that footage again, if you want, you can delete it for storage purposes, but I would try to keep my footage, so yeah. Good time for 1 or 2 more questions maybe?
What's a good entry-level green screen software program?
So a lot of editing software nowadays has green screen stuff built in. It might be called Key Lights in After Effects, or in other programs it might be called Chroma Key. The video editing software that I used at first for many, many years was called Sony Vegas 12, I think is what I used. It's about $50 or $60 flat, that's it, you get the entire program. And with that you get stuff like green screen, keying, and some other basic effects in there. So that's definitely a good recommendation for any level stuff that interests you.
We have one more question.
If you really put yourself to strive to get better, do you think how well do you think it works with improving?
I think it always works. If you, yeah, like I was saying earlier, if you want to improve, you're eventually going to improve. If you keep throwing the same stuff at your fan films over and over, it's always really, really good fun. But yeah, that's about it. So thanks everyone for coming to this panel. So,